My name is Elise Fry. I am the Test Administration and Formative Assessment Specialist with USVE, and I am joined today by Kim Rathke, our Testing and Data Coordinator, who is monitoring our chat, as well as Emily Ing, our Support Specialist. Today, we're going to focus specifically on the guidance for administering RISE and Utah Aspire Plus tests in a remote setting. This training is in addition to the trainings that have been held the last few weeks for both systems. So just understand that it's complementary in nature, not necessarily supplementary in nature. So you're going to want to use it in addition to what has previously been provided. But we're going to provide some specific guidance that really only applies to remote administration. So hopefully when we're finished, you should feel a lot more comfortable with the remote testing administration process, as well as feel more confidence in training the users in your LEA and providing support for them as it's needed. So just as a reminder, this training is being recorded. It will be posted to our assessment YouTube channel in the next few days. The link to the training, as well as the slide deck, will be provided by our wonderful support specialist, Emily Ing, in the coming days when they're ready. I'll also include the link to the training in next week's AD memo as well, so that you have access to it. So first off, when it comes to administering assessments to remote or online students, it requires additional considerations above what would be encountered in the in-person classroom setting. So first and foremost, this functionality is only available for students who are receiving all of their instruction remotely. 100% of their courses need to be online. So even if students who are only enrolled for one course, whether it be like choir, driver's ed, band, PE, etc., they would need to be testing in person, okay? Also, any student who requires a paper form of the test for Utah Aspire Plus will need to test in person. There should be no more than 10 students in any session at any given time. Another component to keep in mind with remote testing is that science tests for RISE grades 4 through 8 will still need to be completed in person, even for fully remote students, okay? And if you complete this in-person experience prior to remote testing, your students will be even more familiar with that login process, which is just, it just gives them that little leg up, a little extra support in that realm, okay? So there should be no more than 10 students allocated to 2 proctors during a testing session for either system, because actively proctoring that many students remotely is going to be a challenge. Okay, these 2 proctors need to be in the same room during the testing sessions for ease of communication. For RISE, we also ask that you conduct one more training test just prior to beginning your summative administration, so that all users, like teachers, students, all users, can ensure their technology is working as expected. They can also ensure that accommodations are set and that the communication tools are functional prior to being in the summative environment. As a reminder, no parents or siblings are permitted to be in the room with students who are testing, and the quiet testing environment that would happen in person should also be enforced at home. So like no music should be playing, TVs shouldn't be on in the background, things like that, okay? Now, if you were in attendance at our Utah Aspire Plus training a couple of weeks ago, you've seen this little screenshot before, but I wanted to stop a minute and address that we're aware that this looks really busy. And this is precisely why having no more than 10 students in a session is imperative, okay? You can see there are 4 video feeds and 4 chats on this screen at one time, along with 2 minimized chats, all from different students. So while you might not have 4 students asking questions at one time, this is a very real world example of what just one proctor's computer screen is going to look like. Notice there are other video feeds below the 4 that are pictured. So scrolling from top to bottom consistently to ensure that all students in your session are being monitored could be a challenge, okay? Because of this, another recommendation that we would have for you is that staff who are working as proctors will want to use the largest screen or monitor they have available because more visible surface area is going to allow for more attention to detail, okay? Because of the nature of remote testing, again, completing a training test remotely with teachers as the proctors is required prior to the administration of the summative test, okay? The more of those you complete, the more confidence you are building with your students and staff that it's going to go seamlessly on testing day. Okay, again, we're asking that just prior to beginning your summative administration for RISE, you do one of these training tests one more time, just to ensure that all technology is working as expected, because a lot can change within a testing system overnight. Okay, students don't need to complete that training test in its entirety, but getting logged in, moving between a couple of questions, allowing the teacher to broadcast any messaging to their group of students could be really helpful. The student testing information, so anything that appears on the testing ticket needs to be provided to students in a secure manner. And we recommend using your school's LMS system or whatever you've been using to communicate with your students in the remote way, in a secure way. The testing ticket for both systems will display the student's name, their SSID, and some information about the test that the ticket is for. The test code for the Utah Aspire Plus test will also appear on the Utah Aspire Plus tickets. An encrypted email would also be appropriate if you wanted to share the information that way, but you'd want to ensure students know how to access the information from an encrypted email before you go that route. And I've just provided a couple of sample tickets here for what RISE looks like, what Utah Aspire Plus looks like, so you know what needs to be provided for students if you're not sharing those testing tickets in a secure manner, if you're just letting them know what they have to have available. You'll also want to ensure that your staff are familiar with any scripting provided in the TAMs, as reading them with fidelity will also still be required. Much of the scripting, though, will be embedded within both systems, so students will need to ensure that their speakers or their headphones, if that's what they're using, are working, because that is how they will access a lot of the scripted material that you have been providing in the past. While completing a test remotely, students will also be able to communicate either through text chat or video chat with proctors. They'll be able to do this directly using the functionality that's provided within the system. So no other system will be able to be running, okay? Both the RISE and the ATOM system for Utah Aspire Plus also require that teachers monitor students directly using their Proctor dashboard features. I should note here that students will not be able to see or communicate with other students who are also testing during the administration of the remote test. They only have that two-way communication with their proctors, all right? While teachers and students do not need to buy or install any additional software to be able to enable remote administration, they do need to have devices, again, with working speakers, a working camera or webcam, microphone, things like that. They also need to ensure that the secure browser for RISE and TestNav for Utah Aspire Plus have been installed on student devices. This is a simple remote proctoring prep checklist and should be completed prior to your remote proctoring, just to ensure that both teachers and students' devices are working as expected. All devices need internet access. For proctors, they will be accessing the administration site, and for students, they access the secure browser. Again, all devices need cameras, microphones, speakers. You can check if they are working properly with the apps and systems check prior to login with the Utah Aspire Plus test, And you can also use the RISE diagnostic tool that's linked at the bottom of this slide to check those tools with your RISE tests. Okay. Again, with the testing tickets, when you're communicating that with students, as well as any scratch paper, because they can still have blank paper for like that math test and things like that, you should also provide guidance to students for how to appropriately destroy that information, okay, once they're completed with their testing session. So for a minute here, we're going to stop and just drop questions in the chat. Again, for anything that's technology setup, proctoring prep, just as a note here, if I haven't covered it yet, so like how students log in, how to create sessions, I probably will. But if you have anything that's just burning in your brain right now based on what we've talked about tech-wise, go ahead and drop it in the chat so we can kind of address those. I know that Kim's been addressing some questions that have dropped in while I was explaining some things there, but I'll open it now too. Anything? Can the training test be given to the whole class the morning before student tests in groups of 10? Camille, even with your training tests, your students should be in your groups of 10.
One reason we're encouraging that, Camille, is because one of the reasons why we're encouraging that is because it's really important for the proctors to also recognize how hard it is to see all of the students at the same time, which is why two proctors are required for every session, because there is a fatigue factor that comes in when you're trying to stare at a screen. This is very different than in-person proctoring where you get up and walk around and kind of glance at the students. You are literally sitting in front of the class staring at them. The other reason why giving a training test to the groups that will actually be proctored allows everyone to see exactly how the system will work with those 10 students. And also the reason why we're saying give a training or practice test immediately before is there are overnight updates that sometimes affect things. There are problems with internet that happen. For some students, especially third and fourth graders, being able to have their parents there just to make sure everything's working before they have to leave the room for the summative test is a really way to think about this. Remote proctoring is much more difficult than doing in-person testing. And I know everyone's really excited about it because you're saving money, not having to reserve sites and things like that. But you do need to realize that there is a much higher cognitive load for both the students and for yourselves. So that's why it's really important to do that. So that's part of it.
Thanks, Kim. Any other questions to address before moving on to some RISE specific guidance? Let's see. I work for a school where students are online. Can I ask about benchmark testing? We administer summative in a brick and mortar building and require them to come on campus for summative. However, I would like to administer some benchmark tests remotely. Benchmark tests can be administered remotely. You're welcome. Just as we're planning things out here, I'm going to start with some specific RISE summative guidance, and then we will also have some specific Utah Aspire Plus guidance, okay? So as we move into the RISE specific section here, for students that are taking remote summative tests in RISE, there is an online student field in the student settings in Tide, okay? All users will be able to see this field, and users with a school administrator role or above, like an LEA level user, will be able to edit that. A teacher is not able to edit that online student field, okay? This must be set to yes for each student to ensure they will receive the remote testing tools, okay? If that little radial button is unset or is set to no, the student is going to receive the standard in-person test. So if you know for sure you've got your list of students who are testing specifically remotely with you, make sure that that radial button for online student is moved to yes or selected as yes. Okay. Whisper, if it is set to yes, yes, they can still test in person because they would have to for the science test. This is just allowing the remote testing tools, the communication pieces, to be available for the ELA and the math tests. Okay. So to make remote administration run more smoothly with RISE, your teachers need to schedule their sessions in advance. So the system is going to provide a session ID for the session, which can then be communicated to students. Okay. The session is not going to begin until the scheduled date and time that's put in by the teacher. So even if students have access to that live code, it's not going to function until their scheduled session start date. Okay. Selecting the date's really easy. You just pick the desired dates from the calendar. Also, if the session's a remote session, a pop-up window is going to appear in your browser and it's going to request access to your microphone and camera. Users need to be able to select the allow, because if you don't select that, students taking the test will be unable to see or hear you during any of the video conferencing that might occur. Okay.
Elise, you have a couple questions that refer back
Oh,
to
okay.
what you started.
Let's see. I'll open that back up.
Can it be done individually or can it be done in bulk? He's setting the online button.
Oh, Rick, that's a good question. I'm not sure if it can be done bulk.
I don't think it can. I
Yes,
think
I
it has
don't
to be
think
done
so.
individually. And then, Rachel, your other question about proctors shouldn't have any applications websites over. Our proctors would like to have a document where they're taking notes of students and all of this. The thing that you need to realize about that is if they accidentally click on the wrong tab, they're going to kick all of the students out of the test. So one of the reasons why we're telling everybody don't have any other applications that open during test administration, I would say for one proctor, it might be okay if they're taking notes, but for the other proctor, one of them I would say would be make sure they don't have anything open at all. Just because in the past, every teacher I know has, graded papers even during in-person administration, and they've clicked on the wrong thing and literally kicked all students out of a test, which in person is not as big of a deal as it is when you're doing this remotely, and now you have to contact all the students to make sure they understand what's going on. So that's why those guidelines are doing that. So if they're trying to take notes and all of that, it may be better to either do it on paper or decide which proctor would be doing the note taking and the other one who is watching. And teachers can switch off on devices and look, they don't have to be only on their own device. They can sit on the other person's device to watch while the testing is taking place, and then they can switch. So they can switch off.
Perfect. Just as a reminder, because we are administering summative tests, this warning box is going to appear when you select administration for a summative test, remote or otherwise. Okay, you will need to type in summative to move forward. This has helped prevent all of the misadministrations that we've experienced in the past. So we really like this little feature. Once you verified that, yes, you're planning to administer the summative test, you just verify which tests you've selected. You see here, I selected remote summative, but I could have used the little add button to specifically select the content for a grade for like ELA 6. Okay. I've named my session as well here in the right below the test selected to reflect the teacher. I want it to be summative. I wanted the content area and the grade. Although this isn't necessary, it's just helpful when it comes to organizing your sessions. Be sure here also to select the remote or hybrid radial option. Okay. I've attempted to highlight that here in yellow. If you don't select this button, the session will still create, but that communication functionality between student and teacher will not be available to any user, and they won't discover that until they're in the system. So if I can stress anything for remote administration, it's to ensure that you've selected that remote or hybrid radial button when prompted to do so. Okay. And then you just save your session as you would any other session that you possibly have started. The creator of the session is then provided with that live session ID, which has to be provided to students securely through your LMS or the encrypted email. Okay. This information should not be shared over any unsecured communications like a personal email or a text message. Okay. When it comes time to start that scheduled session, the dashboard will look very familiar to any other RISE test you've administered. You'll see the session ID along with the option to add tests, the approvals tab, the stop session button, with the addition of the option to broadcast a message to all students in the session, okay? There's also a refresh page button. So for students signing in on their devices in a remote setting, they're going to use the same login interface that Rise Secure browser that in-person students do. They log in with their first name, the SSID, their session ID, which is provided for them. They're going to verify personal information, and then they're going to select their required test. At this point, they are still waiting for approval from the teacher before beginning. Okay, so scripted directions for test administration, those are provided in the TAM. Keep in mind, all of this setup and login is taking place entirely unassisted, as students do not have access to communication tools yet. So this is why we have encouraged you, if you haven't already planned to do so, to test science in person first. That way, students will have gone through this process in that in-person setting first. Okay, they would have had that little scaffolding moment so that they feel more comfortable and confident in doing so, because they're going to have to do it alone for the remainder of their summative testing. Once approved, they will complete a series of audio visual checks that they would if they were in person. And then once they have started that session and have been approved, teachers can communicate with all students through the broadcast megaphone feature. You just type in your message, hit the send paper airplane icon, and it's going to automatically appear on the screen of each student in the session. Because we all know that students really love to use a text and a chat feature, it also might be helpful to remind students that they don't need to individually reply unless you have requested them to do so, okay? Because they're going to be able to respond to any message by typing in the box and selecting the send icon on their devices. So if a student sends a message, the little message waiting icon will appear under the image on the proctor screen, and teachers can then view that and respond as needed. Proctors can also observe video of students all at once in low resolution, or by selecting a student, you can view high resolution, okay? From there, if needed, teachers can also start that one-on-one video conference. And then during the video conference, teachers can see the student, they can hear the student. If the teacher allows, students can see and hear the teacher. There's just toggles at the top where it will show on the microphone and the video. You just have to select that from the call button there. You can see it on the top of this screenshot here. But once that call's initiated on the teacher device, that video conference pop-up window displays, and it's then a split screen to view both the teacher and the student together on devices. Okay. The teacher can then also disconnect the call using the button at the bottom, just like you'd see on your phone. Students who need assistance can request it from their teacher by virtually raising their hand. So if you see that, any student with a hand raised icon is going to bump to the top of the Proctor dashboard, and teachers can respond to the student by, again, either initiating the chat or video like we just went over. When you've completed that interaction, you can lower the hand as well. If during that video conference you need to view the student's screen sharing capabilities are also available for the student to initiate if that would be helpful. Okay. Again, when it comes to anything Rise, we're going to stop here. If you have questions specific for Rise, now is the time. I'm going to open the chat back up as well and see if we've missed a few things in there. Is it possible to create testing sessions that other teachers can access? Can I create all of our testing sessions, and on testing day, each teacher can log in and open the one specifically for their testing group? Or does the session have to be created by the proctor? So Rachel, you should be able to create them, but you would have to do it individually, and then share that live code out to each individual set of proctors. Because each set of proctors would have their own live code that's different from everybody else's. Any other questions specific for Rise? So as long as I share the live code, they should be able to access it as a proctor. I believe so. Kim, are you under the same understanding? I feel like anybody can create it.
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
It's probably actually easier, Rachel, to have your teachers just correct their testing sessions, put them in a training and tell them this is how we're going to do it. It may seem like it's saving you time, but this really isn't a difficult process. And if they've been giving benchmarks all year long, they should already know how to do this. It's exactly the same process. And then you don't have to worry. But yes, you can go in and create them ahead of time if you want to, and then have them each go in. But that is a lot of extra work for people who should be able to just go in and create a testing session.
Yeah, I would recommend the same thing that Kim just mentioned. I would do a training with them to show them how to create the session because once they know how to do it, it's less than 5 minutes for them to create that. And then they would already have their live code. The other nice thing about that, Rachel, if they created their own is if they had to make an edit of any kind, they can go in and edit themselves rather than you having to do any edits or deletes, changes like that would need to happen. You're welcome. Any other RISE questions before we move on to Utah Aspire Plus? If we see someone in the background of a student's screen, what's the process for proceeding with the test? Do we pause the test and talk to them, invalidate? We've practiced this over and over, but just in case. Kim, what guidance would you like to provide there?
The minute you see someone in the background, that test is invalidated. The end. Because now they have violated testing it. You have no idea what's happening, so you automatically invalidate it. So that's the problem. So it's really important that you do that because it's the same as if somebody walked into the room and told them the answers. We don't have any way to know that. So you can hit pause. You can hit the pause, Andrea, at any time. You can click stop test at that time. I would hit pause on that particular student's test. I wouldn't hit pause on everyone's test because you can pause individual tests. And I would just pause it at that time and then, and that would be the thing because it would have to be invalidated. So I mean, I know you practiced it, Jenny. I feel your pain because I know that's the thing everyone's most worried about. But that is the most important thing. It's just like if the proctors think that the students are perhaps accessing another device during testing where they continually are looking away down at a screen and something like that. And once a test is invalidated, they are not eligible for makeup testing. An invalidated test means they have lost their ability to complete that test. So, and that would be invalidated with with the cheating code. So there is no makeup test for that particular content area. That doesn't mean they can't complete their ELA test or a writing test or whatever it is. The participation code for that, Laura, is, since you're worried about it, it is 213.
I would also add here that this would be a great time to also communicate with parents the importance of ensuring that the remote testing environment is appropriate. Just so that they are aware as well of the I don't know if severity is the right word, but of the severity of needing to keep things as secure as possible.
An invalidated test affects the school's participation rate because the test has not been completed and was invalidated due to cheating or poor proctoring. So it does affect your school's participation rate. Part of the need for lots of training and lots of practice with this, which should have been happening since the beginning of school when we had benchmark tests and remote testing, particularly for RISE. We've had this system for 3 years. So.
Any other RISE questions? If something comes up, we should have time at the end as well to address anything that might arise. We'll go ahead and look now more closely at Utah Aspire Plus. So with Utah Aspire Plus, for proctor groups participating, you'll need to ensure that you've selected the remote proctoring checkbox to indicate that that group is testing in a remote setting. Okay, this is a critical step in allowing the proctor and students who are eligible for remote testing to communicate during the test. Similar to the RISE one, it's telling the system that the communication tools needed to be added to that testing opportunity. Without that box marked, it's going to be as though the student is testing in person. They will have no communication tools with their proctors. So as a reminder here, there's a maximum of 10 students in these remote proctor groups. So as you add them, make sure there's 10 or less and that you've checked that remote proctoring box when you go to create those sessions. For remote sessions, proctors will still begin by navigating to Atom, but as a friendly reminder here, your teachers do not log into Atom. There's no login necessary. They just click the Proctor Attest button that's on that homepage on that site. The two proctors you have for each session will need to use the exact same test code and proctor password so that they are monitoring the same proctor group. Okay, with Utah Aspire Plus, each proctor can have their own device and still be viewing the dashboard. This is a feature that is not currently available with Rise. When they get logged in, they will need to confirm their proctor information. And once confirmed, they're going to enter the first and last name. Now, when it comes to this proctor, it can be like the two teachers' last names. Like if it's Mr. Jones and Mr. Roberts who are proctoring, you might choose to have Roberts and Jones be the first and last names here. Okay. Is there a limit on how many proctors can enter? Laura, that is a great question. I don't know if there's a limit, but I know that it will facilitate at least 2. As a reminder, the test code needs to be communicated to the students in your proctor group in that secure manner. Okay, it's going to appear on the testing ticket as well as on the proctor screen and the proctor card. Keep in mind when you share this information with you students, this is only going to be the test code. You do not share the proctor password with your students. Okay, the test code is fine. Proctor password, keep to yourself. The student experience in TestNav starts by asking the student to enter their test code. This is, again, the one that's communicated through your LMS. Okay. The student's going to test their audio prior to moving on to the next screen. And once that's done, they enter their last name and their SSID. All of this is included on that testing ticket if you elect to send those out to students. If you don't, just make sure they know the information that's expected to be there beforehand, because they won't be able to communicate with teachers through the system yet. The test then starts to load and the students will wait for approval from the proctor. And as students start to log in, they will appear on the proctor dashboard as needs attention. And you'll need to access the kebab menu, that's the 3-dot menu, and select approve session. That's approving students into the test. Okay, and as students are approved, they will appear on your proctor dashboard. You'll be able to see students start appearing on screens as they get logged into tests, and communication tools will start to become available. Okay, once the proctor allows the students into the session, they're going to complete a system of a series of system checks. They're going to check their internet connection, their microphone, their speakers, and the last check is the student's camera. Okay, each of these requires the student to press a button on the screen to indicate that the system check can begin. And the student will then receive notification if the system is working or if it's not working as they move through the system's check. Once all 4 systems have gotten that little blue checkbox, okay, the student will then be able to select next, and the student will then be ready to take their test. If at any point in time the system check, if the student has issues, they can raise their hand for assistance and they can chat with the teacher about some troubleshooting options if needed. As the proctor, you'll see that little hand icon appear over the student video to let you know they have a question. You can also see how many students have their hand raised in the status bar of the dashboard, because this can take place during any time of the administration. The student can raise their hand. Okay. Just like with RISE, the Utah Aspire Plus test within the Atom system will allow you to communicate one-on-one with your students using a chat feature. Okay. There's also a call feature for video. Even though there's not a video broadcast option, you can do a broadcast message to all students in your Proctor group with the little megaphone button, super similar to the Rise one. Okay. There's other troubleshooting guidance specific to remote administration that's in the TAM. Okay, that you can familiarize yourself with, but this gives you a high level experience as to what students will see with Utah Aspire Plus. So if there's questions specific to Utah Aspire Plus, I'm happy to address those now. I can see there's some in the chat and Kim has responded to most of those. Just double check here. Rick, you asked, you know that there's two proctors, but you assume one must be a certified teacher. Can the second be a para? That's fine as long as they have gone through the testing ethics training that a teacher would. Okay.
And that includes understanding how to give remote and proctor remote tests. Because this is a whole other animal, when we're getting asked questions, does the validation also apply if a student turns their camera off during testing? Yes, it absolutely applies. One thing to remember that's different about Utah Aspire Plus from Rise is that Utah Aspire Plus is a timed assessment. And when the students are asking questions and are, chatting, the time on their test is still running, just like it does in the classroom. If they ask a question, the timing doesn't stop. So it's really important that you want to make sure that that's one of the reasons why there's two proctors required for this, so that student questions and chats can be answered as quickly as possible. So that's one of the things. So we just wanted to make sure that you're aware. Rise is not timed, but Utah Aspire Plus is. Also, one other thing that's different that you will notice for all Rise and all Utah Aspire tests, whether in person or other, in-person or online remote testing, is that there are embedded instructions now that the students will be listening to. There's far less scripting that the proctors have to read. Elise, you asked a question about what about students with an IEP that includes extra time. They get their extra time to whatever the time was that was identified for Utah Aspire Plus. So for an IEP for Utah Aspire Plus, they would need to take that test in a separate session from other remote students because the timing is different than for the students who are taking, say, a 50-minute test with everyone else. So all students with IEPs that get extra time for Utah Aspire Plus should be in a separate proctored session and should not be tested with everyone else.
And Cynthia, when it comes to the tools for Utah Aspire Plus, I went back 3 slides like you asked. They can raise their hand. Okay. There's also the chat box. So you can see the screenshot of the chat box here where you can type a message. There's also the call button that you can see in the upper right that says start call for a video interaction. So again, raising the hand, chat box, and video. There's also the broadcast tool, which is a message that will go to everyone in the session rather than a one-on-one conversation with a proctor and student. Does that help? Perfect. Any other Utah Aspire Plus questions? So now we're going to get into is Utah Aspire Plus as strict about people coming in and out of the room? Yes, Rihanna. Same idea. They should be in an isolated setting, no music, no access to television or any other devices. No other people should be in the room, no younger siblings, no older siblings, no parents.
So when you say how you can control that, that's one of the things you should have been communicating with parents all year long. I don't know what you mean by passing by in the hallway. The student should be testing somewhere where other people are not around the test. And so that's part of that. So you're going to have to practice that. And yes, it's very well. So somebody who's passing by and not stopping in and talking to them, that's why two proctors, you're going to have to gauge, did they stop and talk? Did they stop and give somebody else something else? That's what they did. So a naughty sibling coming in could be an invalidated test. Yes, again, the parents are doing that. Pets accidentally opening a door. If it's a pet, the student, you need to have some kind of communication with your students to let them know that this test means they are in a room with the doors closed and shut and all of that. And if the proctor shuts off the test, our proctor's the ones that shut off the test if we see someone else in camera. You may pause the test. At least I'll let you get to that. But that's one of the things you need to talk about. Little ones and pets and all of that. It's very important that you guys communicate with parents that this is a standardized, a statewide assessment that requires absolute standardized procedures to administer this test, which means at home, if they were in person, they wouldn't have a dog or their little brother or sister come in or somebody doing something. So it's very important that they're taking this test and doing that.
Elise, yes, cameras should be on the entire test.
And
The
mics.
mic needs, when it comes to muting, you don't have to mute them because you're only going to hear them if they've initiated a video conference, and you can only video conference with students one at a time anyway.
Multiple siblings in the same session have to be in separate rooms. No one should be in the same room together. If they refuse to turn on their camera, they cannot take the test.
Yeah, shouldn't be taking remote testing.
And again, all of this should have been communicated with parents. One of the things you definitely want to do is get your UTELSpire Plus kids doing, do your practice tests with the remote. Can the student read the questions out loud to themselves? If they're in a room by themselves and they're reading, that would just be fine. So invalidated tests affect your school accountability because that means there was either improper proctoring or the students weren't prepared adequately. So that's part of it. They may not take the test again once the test is invalidated. That's how that works. It's the same. It's exactly the same as if you're doing this. So you don't have to do this, and you do not. This is a school choice. All tests are being offered in person everywhere. This is not a requirement, but some of the fully online schools have requested remote proctoring. So that would be something you'd want to bring up with your administration. So. Yeah, the USB slide deck with rules and regulations for teachers and students is the testing ethics policy that everyone should have taken at the beginning of the school year and done that. And you may use the rules and regulations for students and teachers. That's also a local school decision that you also need to show. So that all of the stuff that we're presenting is all part of that. That cameras have to be on and all of that. If they don't want to be on camera and do that, then that would be something to make sure that you would if they're objecting to being on camera, they don't want to do this, then they should test in person because those are the only options you have. Test security is not the most important thing. It's trying to provide an environment for students so that they're testing and they have the same experience testing as other people who are also testing fully online. So really why there are such strict rules are because it's a standardized test and there need to be standardized administration. That's what makes a standardized test. It's everyone hears the same instructions, everyone has the same experience. So that's part of what we're trying to explain. I hope that helps. And we hate sounding like the test police, but this is a new experience for all of us, which is why USBE personnel will be out monitoring in pretty much every single online school off and on throughout the entire testing window. So you'll see us and we're just there to see if there's something else we need to be we need to help with. So it's not an evaluation. It's let's see what we can do better for next year. Jenny, I think that's a really good idea. Jenny typed in the chat that UTVA is having parents sign a testing ethics doc outlining the rule, hoping that will help. And that's a great idea. And I know your school at one time was talking about having little study corrals that the students could put around them, little pop-up corrals that they could put around them. So it was really obvious that they were alone and just working at a desk in front of a computer. And those are also welcome as for that too. So that would be great.
So we've gotten some emails from some of you regarding kind of like what ifs or more nuanced questions. So we're going to address a few of those. So what if devices don't work? When it comes to proctoring devices, I would recommend that proctors have a couple of device options. You may even want to express a similar concern to your parents that ensure that the student's device is charged, make sure that Chromebook's ready to go. Is there an option for a secondary one if something isn't working correctly? Okay. What if students can't get logged in? This is where you may want to have one of your proctors with access to your LMS messaging system so that they can communicate with, students can communicate with the proctors prior to getting into the system so that they know that there is an issue there, because that way the proctor can help the student do some troubleshooting, make sure, caps lock isn't on, or that they aren't hitting the space bar when they try to enter something, things like that. If proctors need assistance starting the session, I would recommend that they reach out to the help desk for whichever system that they are working with, purely because the help desk is going to be available instantaneously to be able to provide support. You are welcome to reach out to myself as well. I just can't guarantee that I will be as quick to respond as the help desk phone number would be. If your students lose connectivity, when it comes to Rise, the nice thing is because it's not timed, they might be logged out and they're going to have to log back in. And as long as it's within like the 20-minute pause rule, they should have no issue getting logged back in with the proctor being able to approve them, and they can continue. When it comes to Utah Aspire Plus, it is going to be considered a system interruption. And so their time will stop at that point, but they will need to work with their proctor to be able to get reseated into the session so that they can continue testing. When it comes to proctors losing connectivity, it's going to pause student tests. So they're not going to be able to continue forward. So the other thing you're going to want to think about here is if your proctors lose connectivity, they're going to want to message that out to students so that they're aware that it wasn't anything that was on the student side, and they will then be momentarily readmitting students as it becomes available. Okay. Are there any other what if scenarios that you would like us to address with you today?
Hey, Rick, what made you reconsider to decide to take your summative test in person? Emery, you asked a question, is the state hoping to move more towards online? The answer to that is no. This is a very limited, and most states do not offer remote proctoring. We're not hoping to move towards more online testing for a lot of the reasons that we have to see for all of that. So that's part of it. Science will not be switched to online for the foreseeable future. We have no idea when that is going to change because of the multi-state MOU that we're in for our science tests. So that's part of it. So Andrew typed in LMS communication at UTVA meets total view. So we will be emailing out the SS number, login number for the test. Jenny, Rachel, is that is total view? Is that your secure way of communicating with the test? And thanks, Rick. You had students problem losing students once they were left to themselves. Okay. Just so you know, Elise, as far as students performing, this is literally the very first year that there are states even doing remote summative tests. Okay.
Rick, thank you for sharing more. He says also that dealing with other technical problems, background disruptions were also a problem. There were just too many variables. Thank you for sharing your experiences. That's really
It really
helpful.
does help everyone too.
When it comes to requiring any like instantaneous troubleshooting help, I provided the help desk information here for both the RISE system as well as the ADAM system for the Utah Aspire Plus administration with their email, the phone numbers, their hours of operation. If you notice, those change a little bit when the summative window opens, so I've added those as well. Okay. Again, if you have other questions you'd like us to address, feel free to stay on and drop them in the chat. But as far as what we've provided for you as far as slides go, this is the end of our slide presentation. So if you're comfortable moving forward, you're welcome to drop off the call. But again, if you have other questions or nuanced things you want to run past Kim and I, we are happy to stay on and chat with you in the Zoom meeting chat here and address any other questions or concerns that you may have. Rachel, I will get them to Emily and they will be posted in Midas along with the recording link when that's ready. You're welcome. Anything else we can help with this afternoon? Thank you so much for your attendance. We are happy to help you with any requests that you may have or inquiries that come because this is new for all of us. So don't hesitate to reach out if there are other questions or concerns that might come up. But again, thank you so much and we will see you on another day.